This happened about 2 weeks ago. I'm a 32-year-old emergency room nurse, and I work night shifts at a small-town hospital. The place is old and a bit creepy. The walls are a tired green, and the flickering fluorescent lights make everything feel off. The waiting room is usually empty, filled with squeaky chairs and a vending machine that hums like it's alive. I thought I would just get through another routine shift. On my third night, while organizing patient charts at the nurses' station, I noticed the lights flickering in the children's ward. I told myself it was just bad wiring. But then I heard soft giggles echoing down the hallway. It sent a chill down my spine. I shook my head, thinking I was just tired. The next night, while stocking supplies, I heard tapping coming from the closet. I froze and frowned. I opened the door slowly and found it empty. My heart raced. I thought about checking the records, but saw no new patients in pediatrics. I was alone, and that tapping wouldn't leave my mind. Each night, I noticed shadowy figures flitting around corners. Was I seeing things from exhaustion? It felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I started checking the children's ward lights more often, half expecting to find someone there. A few nights later, I sat at the nurse's station when I heard a constant tick-tick-tick. It came from the supply closet again. I approached it and opened the door. Just supplies and the smell of antiseptic. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, but I felt like I was being watched. Then, on the last night of my shift, everything changed. I leaned back against the vending machine, munching on stale chips. All I could hear was a soft, distant giggle. I glanced around and the hospital was silent. I turned to look down the hallway, and that's when I saw shadows slipping into the children's ward. I blinked, and they were gone. I felt odd. I stepped out of my spot, tentatively moving toward the ward. The air felt heavy. I couldn't breathe. I thought about calling for help, but wasn't sure what to say. "Hello?" I croaked, but it echoed back at me. That's when I heard it. Soft footsteps behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. My heart raced as I felt drawn to the children's ward again. I approached the door, trembling. I pushed it open slowly and peered inside. It was dark, but I saw shapes moving. Were those kids? It didn't feel right. They were too still. The giggling started again, louder. I stepped back, but my foot slipped on something sticky. I looked down and saw a small puddle, red and dark. Suddenly the giggles stopped. I felt an icy breath on my neck. "Play with us," a voice whispered. I turned around fast, but there was no one there. I darted out of the ward and back to the nurse's station. I grabbed my phone, shaking. I tried to text a coworker, but my hands weren't steady. I was scared, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted out of that place. Those shadows had felt real. Too real. I heard the giggles again, this time right beside me. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran for the exit, desperate to leave the nightmare behind. I glanced back one last time and saw a child's face, pale and smiling, before I burst through the door into the night. I never looked back. The next day, I called in sick. I needed to gather my thoughts after that night. My heart still raced just thinking about it. What had I seen? The face? The giggles? It was unbearable. I dropped my phone on the table and grabbed a cup of coffee. I had a feeling I wouldn't be able to face the hospital anytime soon. But I needed answers. I remembered hearing stories about this place, ghosts, tragedies. I never believed them until now. I pulled up my laptop and searched for the hospital online. My fingers trembled slightly, a mix of fear and curiosity. I found a few articles about its history, buried deep in the internet. Most of them were about the children's ward. There had been several deaths over the years, too many for a simple explanation, and none were ever fully resolved. One article mentioned a fire that had occurred decades ago. Apparently some children had been trapped inside. The stories claimed they never left. "Just urban legends," I muttered. But the memories of the giggling made it hard to believe that. Late in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was my manager asking if I could come in for a brief meeting. I hesitated. The thought of returning made my stomach twist, but I agreed. Maybe I could find some answers, or at least share how I felt. When I arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere felt different. darker. The old green walls seemed to absorb the light. I walked in slowly, taking a deep breath. The hospital was quiet, almost too quiet. I headed to the nurse's station, but my manager was nowhere to be found. I jiggled my phone nervously, the agent's absence pricking my anxiety. I thought about turning around and leaving, but curiosity got the better of me. Instead, I walked toward the children's ward. It felt like the central point of the oddness. Each step pulled me closer, and I tried to ignore the heaviness in the air. Just as I reached the hallway, I heard it again. A soft giggle, echoing eerily against the wall. I stopped in my tracks. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. For a moment, there was silence, and I felt silly for talking into the emptiness. Then I heard it again, right behind me. I turned quickly. Nothing. Just the stillness of the dim hallway. My heart pounded as I felt the urge to flee. But then I heard another sound. A low hum, like a lullaby. I glanced back toward the children's ward. The door was ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me inside. My heart raced, but I felt a strange pull. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. As I pushed the door open, I saw toys scattered across the floor. Old, broken ones. But that wasn't what froze me in place. Sitting in the far corner, illuminated by the flickering overhead light, was a small figure. A child. I blinked, and the child turned to look at me. "Play with us," they whispered, their voice sweet but chilling. The hairs on my arms stood up. I needed to leave. I backed away slowly, but just then, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the room. The laughter began again, echoing all around me. I was no longer sure if I was dreaming or if this was a real nightmare come to life. I pressed my back against the door, my breath quickening. The giggling grew louder, filling the space around me, overwhelming my senses. I couldn't see the child clearly, only a vague shape in the shadows. But somehow, I felt she was not alone. I strained my ears, trying to discern the voices amidst the laughter. "Play with us!" echoed again, this time accompanied by footfalls. I risked a glance around the room, my heart hammering in my chest. Toys lined the shelves, tattered and dusty, but they didn't seem abandoned. A doll's head faced me, its eyes wide open. I wanted to scream, but fear clenched my throat. Just as I turned my focus back to the door, the child reached out a small hand. "Don't be scared," she chirped. But her voice had changed, becoming deeper, darker. I stumbled back, only to trip over a fallen toy. As I landed hard on the floor, the darkness around me seemed to pull closer, pressing against my skin. "Join us!" came another voice, a deeper, echoing tone that sent shivers through my spine. I struggled to my feet, just as the flickering light overhead stuttered and went out entirely. I was plunged into darkness, with only the laughter of unseen children vibrating off the walls. Panic surged through me, and instinct kicked in. I rushed toward the door, pounding on it with my fists. "Let me out!" I shouted hoarsely, but the laughter only grew, a symphony of eerie joy that mocked my desperation. My heart raced as I fumbled for the door handle, praying I could escape this endless night. Suddenly, the door swung open. I hesitated, half expecting a face to peer in at me. Instead, I saw the familiar light of the hallway bleeding into the room. "Come play!" the child called again, this time followed by a chorus of high-pitched giggles. I darted into the hallway, fear propelling me forward. I sprinted past the nurse's station, my thoughts racing. I needed to find someone, anyone, who could help explain what was happening. As I reached the main waiting area, I collided with my manager, who looked surprised but annoyed. "There you are. I've been looking for you. We need to talk about the incident last night. You shouldn't wander off during the shift." "Incident?" I repeated, breathless. My mind flashed back to the child's face, the laughter, the darkness. I was still shaking. "You don't understand. I saw—" "Just come with me," she said, cutting me off. She didn't seem to be listening. My stomach twisted as I glanced back toward the children's ward. Was I imagining it? I shook my head to clear the thoughts, but they stuck to me like cobwebs. As I followed her down the hallway, each step felt heavier. I had to find out what had been happening here. But what if knowing the truth was worse than living in the dark? I didn't even notice when we reached the staff room. Then everything changed. The lights flickered above us, and I felt the temperature drop. A whisper wafted through the air. "You can't leave." I whipped around to find a shadowy figure behind me. My breath caught in my throat. "Who are you?" I demanded, stepping back instinctively, my heart racing. The figure smiled, a grin far too wide. "Play with us." And that's when I truly understood. Whatever was haunting this hospital wasn't just a ghost story. It was something far more sinister. I stumbled back, my heart pounding aggressively as the figure loomed closer. The shadows wrapped around it like a cloak. It was a child, but not like the one I had seen earlier. This one had dark eyes that glimmered with mischief, and the grin stretched impossibly wide, eerie beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. "Who are you?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Join us," it whispered, beckoning with a crooked finger. In that moment, confusion tangled with fear. My manager's voice, though still nearby, felt distant. "You shouldn't be here," I muttered, hoping somehow my words could shield me from whatever this was. But the child only laughed, the sound like nails scraping against glass. My instincts screamed for me to run, but my feet seemed glued to the floor. The flickering lights overhead momentarily illuminated the creature's form, and I could see it was dressed in tattered remnants of what might have once been a hospital gown. A chill ran down my spine. Then I noticed something glinting on the floor. A small metal object. I bent to pick it up, heart racing. It was a faded identification badge, a name partially scratched out. But the photograph, it was a boy. The same boy from the shadows, with the same hollow eyes. As I straightened up, I realized the laughter had subsided. A hush filled the room, suffocating in its intensity. The shadowy child had also vanished, leaving nothing but an uneasy silence. I turned to find my manager had stepped back, her face pale. "What's wrong?" I asked, panic bubbling beneath the surface. I felt something. The air changed," she stammered. My heart sank. If she could sense it too, then I wasn't losing my mind after all. "I saw a child," I said, desperate for validation. "She wanted me to play. And that other one, he was—" I couldn't finish the sentence, the weight of it too much to bear. Before she could respond, the lights flickered again, this time plunging us into darkness. Panic surged, and I grabbed her arm. "We need to get out of here," I urged, the words spilling out in a rush. Just then, a soft melody filled the air, sweet but twisted. The sound of children's laughter chiming through the darkness, filling the void as if they were circling us. I squinted into the blackness, trying to see, but it was as if the night itself was alive, wrapping around us. "Stay close," my manager whispered, though her voice trembled. We moved together, inching toward the door. I held my breath, the laughter growing louder, mixing with the melody, and every instinct told me to flee. Then, as if summoned by our fear, shapes began to manifest in the gloom. White faces with wild hair and hollow eyes, watching us from the corners. I felt bile rise in my throat. "Leave us alone," I shouted. But my voice was swallowed by the ensuing laughter, echoing endlessly like a taunt hanging in the air just above our heads. That's when I saw it. A flicker of light down the hallway. It seemed to pulse, a beacon amid the encroaching darkness. Grabbing my manager by the wrist, I yanked her toward it. "This way!" I cried, and we tore down the corridor, desperate to escape whatever haunted this place. As we raced toward the light, a whisper followed us, soft but clear. "You can't leave us." Somewhere deep inside, I knew we were running from more than just children's laughter. This was something that craved to hold us, to wrap us up in its nightmarish embrace. And as we drew closer to the light, the laughter began to rise once more, echoing around us in a frantic crescendo. The light we sprinted toward flickered uncertainly, and for a moment, I thought it might flicker out completely. I forced the thought away. I couldn't focus on anything other than putting one foot in front of the other, pulling my manager along behind me. Each step felt heavier, as if the darkness was reaching for us, trying to drag us back. When we finally reached the door, it swung open with an unsettling creak. I shoved my manager in front of me, practically pushing her into the safety of the adjoining room. As I followed, I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it, panting for breath. We were in a small storage room, filled with boxes and equipment. The walls were lined with shelves stacked high, mostly filled with medical supplies. As my eyes adjusted, they landed on a set of windows. A thin strip of light bounced off the glass, revealing a faded mural on the opposite wall depicting a sunny day in a park, children laughing. It felt wrong. "Are we safe?" my manager whispered, her wide eyes flicking around the room. I didn't have an answer. I could hear the laughter still echoing faintly from the hallway, as if it was taunting us, reminding us that we weren't out of danger yet. "Just for a moment," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I took a step away from the door and scanned the room. That's when I noticed a small closet in the corner. It was ajar, a sliver of darkness yawning wider as I approached it. "Listen," I said, leaning closer. The laughter had quieted, but I could swear I heard something else. A soft, tinkling sound, like wind chimes. Curiosity pushed me forward. "What is that?" "Maybe it's just—" my manager began, but I shot her a warning look. I gripped the closet's handle and pulled it open. Inside was a jumble of outdated equipment. But what caught my eye first was a small porcelain music box sitting atop an old shelf. It looked out of place, untouched by dust. My heart raced as I reached for it, feeling the smooth surface beneath my fingers. "Don't," my manager said urgently. "It's probably just junk." Ignoring her, I opened the lid. A haunting melody began to play, the same twisted tune that had followed us before. The room felt colder. I could see my breath, a mist gathering in the dim light. The music made my skin crawl, but I couldn't pull my gaze from the box as it revealed a tiny ballerina spinning in circles. Suddenly the music stopped. I felt the air shifting around us, the familiar laughter creeping back in, louder this time, sharper like a knife. It echoed from the hallway, relentless and overpowering. "Get it out!" my manager shouted, panic rising in her voice. "I can't," I stammered, frozen. I heard the sound of footsteps, small, hurried feet coming from the darkness, a cacophony of laughter spilling into our hiding place. Just as I thought we'd be discovered, the door burst open again, but it wasn't a child standing there. It was the vibrant image of the same boy from the hospital gown, grinning even wider now, his hollow eyes locked onto mine. "Play with us," he said, and I stumbled back, the music box slipping from my grasp. It hit the ground, shattering into pieces. The laughter stopped. A heavy silence fell over the room, thick as a fog. For a moment, I thought we might finally be free. But as that silence lingered, I started to hear whispers swirling around us. A new sound wrapping around the silence, chilling me to the bone. "Now you're one of us." And before I could process what that meant, I felt something brush against my arm, something cold and small, and I realized the room was filling with shadows once more. The shadows swirled and thickened, crawling along the walls like tendrils of smoke. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to focus on something else, anything else. I could feel my heart racing, a percussion against my ribs. "Maybe we should go back to the door," my manager suggested, her voice shaky. I nodded, though the thought of facing whatever lay beyond made my skin crawl. But we had to move. Without saying a word, I took her hand, and we inched toward the door. I reached for the handle, but it refused to budge. Panic surged through me. "Come on!" I shouted, rattling the handle. "Open!" Behind us, the whispers grew louder. They mingled with the laughter, creating a chaotic symphony of sound that filled the room. "You're not leaving!" they seemed to taunt. "Stop it!" my manager screamed, pressing her palms against her ears. I felt the walls closing in around us. "Let's find something to defend ourselves," I said, desperate to keep my mind from spiraling into fear. I turned away from the door and scanned the storage room again. There had to be something. Next to the closet stood a tall shelf filled with medical supplies. I rushed to it, shoving away packages of gauze and boxes of syringes until I spotted what I hoped would help: a heavy metal flashlight. I grabbed it, feeling its weight bolster my resolve. "Maybe we can use this to drive them back," I said, though doubt gnawed at me. "Drive who back?" she asked, eyes darting to the swirling shadows. "There's nothing here." I turned the flashlight on, its beam piercing the darkness. The shadows recoiled slightly at the light, flickering as if they were alive. The whispers quieted, and I felt a surge of hope. But that hope shattered when I noticed a figure at the far end of the room. A little girl in a white dress stood in front of an old trunk, her hair obscuring her face. "Help me," she murmured, her voice sweet but chilling. I stumbled backward, bumping into my manager. "Did you see that?" I gasped, terrified, yet drawn to her. "I don't care what I just saw. We need to get out," she shouted, urgency pushing her toward the door. As I aimed the flashlight at the girl, she looked up, her eyes dark, like endless abyss. "I know you want to play," she said, her voice eerily echoing the same sentiment as the boy. No, we just want to leave." Suddenly the laughter returned, filling the room with a frenzied joy that made my stomach churn. I felt the shadows press against us, an almost tangible force, pushing us closer to the girl. "Help me," she repeated, and suddenly the trunk behind her creaked open. I was rooted to the spot, horrified curiosity keeping me frozen. My instincts screamed to run, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. "Don't look!" my manager yelled, her voice barely breaking through the laughter. But it was too late. The trunk cracked open wider, revealing something dark inside, something that seemed to breathe, shifting like a living creature. That's when I saw it, a pair of small, bony hands reaching out, grasping for freedom. I felt my breath hitch in my throat, fear locking me in place. Before I could react, the darkness surged forward, pulling on my sleeve and tugging at my heart. "Now you're one of us." The whispers coalesced into a singular, menacing voice. I dropped the flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. I knew right then that I had to escape. But escape to where? What awaited us beyond the door? In that moment of uncertainty, I realized the shadows were closing in fast. We had to decide: fight or flee. As I scrambled for the door, I felt the coldness wrap around my ankles, fighting to pull me back into the void. Suddenly the laughter stopped again, replaced by a deafening silence that pressed against my ears. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing from behind. Someone was coming. The footsteps echoed louder, punctuating the oppressive silence. My heart raced as I spun around, searching for the source. The shadows shifted, but they didn't form a clear shape. It was impossible to tell if it was a person or another manifestation of this nightmare. "Are you okay?" my manager whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. I could see the fear mirrored in her eyes as we both turned toward the sound. "Not really," I muttered, but I barely heard my own words over the thundering in my chest. The door was still locked, and dread settled heavily in my stomach. Then a silhouette emerged from the shadows, a figure stepping into the flickering beam of my flashlight. My breath caught as I recognized a familiar face: Steve, one of the night nurses. His face was drawn tight, eyes wide and unblinking. "Steve!" I called, relief washing over me. "What are you doing here?" But instead of answering, he opened his mouth, and a chorus of laughter erupted, sounding like the children's laughter I'd heard before. It echoed around the room, taking on a mocking tone. "What the hell?" I gasped, taking a step back. I glanced toward my manager, who looked as bewildered as I felt. "This isn't funny." "Yeah, not funny at all," his voice chimed, different from the Steve I knew. "You're trapped here with us. It's playtime." "Playtime?" My voice wavered, creeping closer to panic. "Where are the real nurses? The ones who should be here?" "They're not here anymore," he said, his smile unnaturally wide. "Join us, instead." The shadows danced around him, twisting and flowing like mist. I raised the flashlight, aiming it toward him, but it felt feeble against the weight of the atmosphere. "Stay back!" I shouted, trying to sound brave. The light illuminated his features briefly, highlighting a look of twisted glee as he stepped closer. "No, please don't make it harder," he pleaded, in a voice that was no longer his. "You don't want to disappoint them." Before I could react, the laughter crescendoed again, and the shadows lunged toward me, their cold tendrils wrapping around my arms and legs. I fought against them, but they were unnaturally strong. "Help her!" I gasped to my manager, but she was frozen, eyes wide and mouth agape. "Help?" Steve's voice echoed wryly. "You think she can help you? She might actually be worse off than you." Everything blurred as I strained against the grip of whatever this was. The tendrils tightened, an icy grip that made breathing difficult. In that moment, I noticed something. there was a faint glimmer behind Steve that caught my eye. A small, pale object hid just beyond him, nestled in the corner. "I don't want to be here," I cried, the words spilling from me in desperation. "I just want to leave." The shadows roared, drowning out my voice, but the glimmer drew my focus, and I instinctively knew it held a chance. It was the key to the trunk, or maybe even a way out. With every ounce of strength I had left, I surged forward, breaking free of the shadow's grip. I raced toward the glimmering object, Steve's laughter ringing in my ears like a twisted farewell as I lunged for it. When my fingers wrapped around the cool surface, the laughter faded suddenly. The shadows hesitated, as if waiting for my next move. I could feel the air shift, a new energy pulsing around me. But before I could make sense of it, everything shifted. The room grew darker, colder, and for a moment, it felt like I was about to be swallowed whole. Then, everything went silent again. "What did you find?" my manager finally asked, dread lacing her words. I stared at the object in my hand, heart pounding as I realized it wasn't just any key. It was something darker. I had to know what it unlocked. The key felt cold and heavy in my hand, its metallic surface glimmering faintly in the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever door it unlocked wouldn't lead me to safety. "Where did you find that?" my manager asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Right there, behind Steve," I said, glancing back at the now empty space. "But it wasn't really him, was it? I mean, that wasn't Steve." Her eyes widened as she considered my words. "I don't think so. He was different. Something was off." With my heart still racing, I examined the key. It had strange symbols etched into it, twisting designs that seemed to shift when I looked too hard. I felt a pull, like the key was alive, calling me to use it. "Do you think it could unlock a door?" she asked, scanning the room for anything resembling one. "I hope so," I replied, glancing around. "This place is like a maze. There has to be something." As I turned, a chill swept through the room. The shadows were still there, lingering, and I could almost hear the whispers of laughter again. My skin prickled with a sense of urgency. I needed to find out what this key opened, but I also needed to move fast before whatever came next showed itself again. "There's a storage room down the hall," my manager said, gesturing with a shaky hand. "It has a heavy door with a lock. Let's go." We started down the dimly lit corridor, my flashlight flickering as if sensing the tension in the air. The laughter faded into the background, replaced by an overwhelming stillness. I could feel the weight of every step. It was as if the hospital itself was watching. When we reached the storage room, I hesitated, my pulse quickening. The old door loomed before us, heavy and imposing. Would the key fit? "What if it doesn't?" my manager asked. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Then we find another way," I replied, trying to sound steadier than I felt. I pushed the door, and it groaned in response, as if protesting our intrusion. It didn't budge. With a deep breath, I inserted the key into the lock and turned it slowly. To my surprise, it clicked open. As the door creaked ajar, a rush of cold air spilled out, carrying with it a mix of scents: sterile, old, and something decayed. My heart sank, but curiosity pushed me forward. Inside, the room was dark, the shelves lined with medical supplies and equipment. But in the far corner, a flickering light revealed what looked like an old trunk. It was battered and covered in dust, its lock rusted over. "What do you think is inside?" my manager whispered, inching closer. "I have to find out," I said, drawn to it. I reached for the trunk, my fingers trembling as I brushed off the dust, feeling a wave of coldness emanate from it. Just then, I heard it again, a soft giggle. My stomach dropped as I turned to see a small figure standing in the doorway, the dim light casting its shadow long against the wall. "Time to play." It was a child's voice, light yet chilling. I couldn't see the face clearly, but I was sure I recognized it from the earlier whispering laughter. "We need to get out of here," I said, pulling my manager back reflexively. But the moment I turned back to the trunk, it was wide open. Suddenly the lights flickered, and that child's laughter filled the air again, echoing off the walls. The darkness began to close in once more, amplifying my fear. And in that moment, I realized that whatever was in that trunk might be the key to understanding everything. Or it might be my undoing. Before I could act, the door slammed shut behind us. The laughter crescendoed, and I knew we were far from alone now. I stood frozen for a moment as the door slammed shut, the sound echoing ominously in the confined space. My manager gripped my arm, panic evident in her wide eyes. "Why is it locked?" "It was open just a second ago," she exclaimed, pulling at the door handle as if sheer force could break us free. "Just stay calm, okay?" I said, trying to sound more composed than I felt. Inside, the trunk beckoned me with its eerie glow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it might hold answers, or worse. The child's laughter floated around us, taunting, echoing off the sterile walls. I turned back, determined to investigate. I approached the trunk, heart racing. The last thing I wanted was to look inside, but curiosity was driving me forward. As I inched closer, I noticed something strange. A faint scraping noise, like nails against a surface. It was coming from inside the trunk. My breath caught in my throat. "What is that?" my manager whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. The giggling intensified, now joined by soft whispers that twisted my name. I hesitated before peering over the rim of the trunk. The interior was dark, but the flickering light revealed the edges of what looked like stuffed animals, worn and tattered, their eyes button-like and staring blankly. Above them, I caught a glimpse of something else. A small, glimmering object caught the light. "Can you see anything?" my manager asked, inching closer behind me. "Just some old toys, maybe," I murmured, my voice trailing off. Yet deep down, I felt I was missing something. I reached inside, my fingers brushing against the rough fabric of an old bear. It felt colder than I expected, sending a shiver up my spine. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, overlapping. "Play with us," they chanted. I stumbled back, dropping the stuffed bear. It hit the floor with a thud, and the moment it did, all noise vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence. "What was that?" my manager asked, eyes darting around as if they could grab onto the unseen presence surrounding us. Before I could answer, the trunk shifted. It felt alive, pulse-like, as if something inside was stirring. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Then I saw it, a small hand reaching up from the darkness inside the trunk, fingers delicate and eerily thin. "Come play," it rasped. The voice dripping with sweetness turned sour. All my instincts flared as I swayed backward, adrenaline taking over. I slammed my palms against the trunk to close it and turned to my manager. "We have to get out of here, now!" She trembled, nodding, and we both pushed against the door. "It's stuck!" she cried in frustration. I glanced back at the trunk, sure that whatever was inside was now awake. "What do we do?" my manager whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Maybe there's another way out." My mind raced, searching for an escape. Just as I turned to scan the room, the flickering light above us surged, brightening with an intensity that made me squint. Then it burst, plunging us into darkness. A new wave of laughter swelled around us, sinister and close. "Let's play!" I couldn't tell which direction to run. The laughter echoed in my ears, drowning out my thoughts. That's when I felt it. A cold breath on the back of my neck. Panic propelled me forward, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. I was trapped, and whatever was lurking in the shadows was no longer just a distant echo. They were here, and I was about to find out just how alive the darkness really was. The darkness wrapped itself around me like an oppressive blanket, and every instinct screamed at me to flee. Evidently there was no real escape. There were only choices. I turned and pulled my manager with me, focusing on the last faint glimmer of safety that showed itself at the edge of my panic. "Push!" I urged, both of us throwing our bodies against the door again. It rattled with intent, but the darkness seemed to concert together, pulling at the door just as fiercely as we pressed. Then, a growl emerged from the shadows, an unsettling mix of laughter and something feral. It was close now. Too close. The whispers swirled in a frenzy, a cacophony of childish voices urging me to play with us and join us. The atmosphere thickened, pressing insidiously around our throats. I couldn't breathe. Terror constricted around my chest. "Let's find the light," my manager shouted over the din, her voice a fragment of resolve piercing through the chaos. I nodded, recalling the flashlight I dropped when the laughter began. Somehow, I had to reclaim it. "Cover me!" I yelled, diving away from the door and making a break for the trunk. The darkness felt alive, as if it could reach out and snatch me back at any second. I lunged for the flashlight, now strewn among the stuffed toys that seemed to be gnashing their teeth, their stillness broken by a few reflected glimmers of light. I grabbed the flashlight and twisted it back on. Blinding light erupted from the beam, cutting through the pervasive blackness that swirled all around. The creatures lurking in my mind fled from the light, revealing the depth of the room around us. "Your light!" my manager shouted, her eyes wide as she stood behind me, fortifying our position. "Use it!" The whispers receded, but transformed. "You can't escape!" echoed through the air, their tones shifting ominously. I fought against the rising tide of dread, but this wasn't the end. I turned back to explore the shadows, using the light to push back the whispers, to reclaim my sanity and brave the truth of whatever haunted this room. And there, among the dust and despair, I saw the trunk. The lid creaked open slowly, revealing not only those forgotten toys but something much darker. Pictures drawn in a rush, scrawled in children's handwriting, their messages raw and pleading. "Help us!" they begged, casting long shadows against the wall, and a chill swept through me. "What is going on here?" I murmured, scanning the pages. The flickering light revealed more than just the artifacts of past games. It brought memories to life. Memories of innocent faces turned to shadows. Each word I read twisted deeper into my chest. A tapestry of tragedy stretching across this place. "Do you see that?" My manager's voice pulled my focus. "Look at the wall." I turned, gradually, and as I redirected the beam of the flashlight, the wall revealed itself. It was covered with drawings, colorful but haunting, images of children playing, laughing, and etched within them were figures dressed in tattered clothes, their eyes void of life. Each stroke of chalk and crayon hung like a silent scream behind the joy. "Now you're one of us!" came the chorus of laughter again, the shadows starting to muster back, strategic, creeping ever closer, mirroring the joy in those drawings but tainted by something sinister. "Together!" my manager yelled. "We have to find a way!" "No, they're trying to take us!" I exclaimed, fighting against my rising panic. But the light faltered, twisting dim. I felt its warmth recede, the shadows drawing closer, practically tangible, reaching for us as if trying to drag us alongside the children they had once trapped. The fear seeping in was becoming insatiable, and despair clutched at my throat. A sudden surge of adrenaline pushed me forward. "We can't stay here, let's go back," I urged. But I held the light steady, focused like a beacon against the gloom, and with it came my will. "I'm with you," she replied, determination etched on her face. "Leave behind the trunk, right now." I understood. We turned toward the door, eyes locked against the gathering darkness, hands gripping tightly where the whispers began to rise again, to communicate, to plead, to beckon. "All together!" I shouted as we hurled ourselves against the door with every ounce of power we had left. The heavy door rattled, and then, like the universe shaking in response, the air shifted. The door creaked open. Light flooded into the room, washing away the shadows that grasped too strongly at our ankles. We burst forward, the sounds of children's laughter shimmering like echoes in the void. As we surged down the corridor, my breath came fast. Behind us, the laughter crescendoed, but this time it felt incomplete, an unfurling of something lost. We reached the exit, and with a final shove, the door forced open to reveal the night outside. We stumbled into the parking lot, trembling, panting, heartbeats thumping in rhythm as we saw the stars above. But while we had escaped the hospital, I felt the weight of questions still hanging around. Whispers lingered in my ears, secrets hidden amongst the shadows. Did we truly leave it all behind? My phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. I glanced down, expecting a mundane message. Instead, it was a forgotten notification, a reminder of my next shift at the hospital scheduled for tomorrow night. I stopped cold, fear coiling back into my gut. All I could think was, their whispers would be waiting, wouldn't they? I moved to a different city after that. The darkness lingered in the edges of my mind, and sometimes I would hear that laughter, light yet chilling, beckoning me back. Life continued, because it had to. But every night, as shadows replaced light, I wondered what awaited in that hospital, what still lingered, what would always call for me.